Good evening, everybody. Welcome to tonight's Development Control meeting. There are no fire alarms scheduled for this evening. Therefore, if the fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the building immediately. The fire exit is located at the rear of this room. Go down the stairs and meet in the War Memorial Park. Please note that this meeting is being webcast live on the internet, and could everybody turn their phones off or to silent? Thank you. For the benefit of members of the public watching or participating in this meeting, I would like to explain who everyone is. My name is Councillor Nick Robinson and I am Chairman of this committee. To my right are councillors who will be making decisions on the applications on this evening's agenda. To my immediate right and left are officers who will be presenting the applications and providing advice to the committee. The Development Control Committee is a regulatory committee, not a political meeting. The committee will be considering the published papers, examining the evidence brought before us tonight, and will make decisions based on planning reasons. We are guided by national and local planning policy and guidance. At the appropriate time, I will invite speakers to contribute to the meeting in the order set out in the update paper. May I ask all speakers, including visiting members, to speak clearly and to keep points made on the application on material reasons only. No further dialogue between members of the committee and speakers will be permitted once questioning has finished. All speakers will be reminded of their permitted speaking time and will be advised when they have 1 minute remaining. May I ask all committee members to avoid repetition and to keep any comments on each planning item to a maximum of 4 minutes. This evening there are 7 items on the agenda and I anticipate to be finished by 9 o'clock. I understand that planning can be emotive and ask that everyone remains polite and professional through this meeting. Thank you. Apologies for absence and substitutions. I have been informed of none, and it looks like everybody's here. Declarations of interest. Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. On item 1, I'm predetermined. I'll be leaving the committee and will speak as a ward councillor from the public gallery.
Thank you. Councillor Frost.
Thank you, Chair. I'd also like to declare interest in item 1 and also item 8.
Thank you, Chair. Items 4 and 5, I'm a parish councillor for that ward and I was involved in the parish council response, which I'll provide more clarity on when we come to the topic.
Councillor Frost, could you clarify what your interest was on that item?
Yes, certainly with item 1, I used to work there, okay, and I know the landlords. Okay, and item 8 and also item 9. Item 8, my ex-in-laws are very, very close to that particular farm. Okay, and item 9.
Item 9 has been withdrawn.
Oh, right. Okay, there we go.
Thank you. Thank you. No others? No, thank you. Urgent matters, I have none. Minutes of the meeting held on the 8th of March are not ready yet, so we will deal with those at the next meeting. Applications. Number 1, Intech, Wade Road, Basingstoke, Norden Ward. Please, officer, to introduce.
Thank you, Chair. This is an application for the demolition and replacement of part of the Intech 2 building and erection of 2 new buildings for flexible use classes within Class E, B2 and B8, together with parking, landscaping and associated works. The Intech site comprises of 2.8 hectares, lies within the settlement policy boundary for Basingstoke and also within a strategic employment area. The immediate context of the site in which it sits is that of a commercial industrial area close to the A33 ring road. The redevelopment of the southern portion of the site would provide the new units, and these would be sited on an area of land where previous, now demolished buildings in Tech 4 and 5 were previously located. Both the planning policy framework and the local plan policy supports the principle of the proposal, seeking to protect strategic employment areas and encourage new growth of businesses. The report sets out in detail the key issues and how the scheme is considered to be acceptable against those material planning considerations. The report also sets out that the proposal is acceptable in terms of residential amenity, impact on character of the area, and technical matters have been addressed, subject to a number of conditions set out in the main report. I would draw members' attention to the update paper, where since the compilation of the final report, a further 12 letters of objection have been received. A detailed summary of those details are set out within the paper. These concerns are akin to those already set out in the main agenda, of which have been addressed. Members will also see that further dialogue with the Health and Safety Executive has been undertaken and a consultation has been received, confirming that the HSC does not wish to object to the proposal. The recommendation is for approval, subject to the completion of a legal agreement, the heads of terms of which have been agreed, and the agreement is nearing signature. So the recommendation is for approval, subject to the completion of that agreement and all the conditions within the main report.
Thank you, Lisa. If we could have our first speakers, which is Ms Byrne and Mr Jeffrey, please, to the speakers' chairs, which are over there. Good evening to you both. You have 4 minutes between you. I will warn you when you have 1 minute remaining, and it's the right-hand button for the microphone, and it will light up red for you. No, right-hand button, and it will light up. That's it.
Thank you. Do I start? Okay, thank you. Myself and Sharon are speaking on behalf of the residents of Lichpit. I've resided there for 42 years and saw the Intech development being built, which was originally office buildings that operated between 8 and 6 Monday to Friday. A change of use application was granted without any local consultation, so we had no possibility of objecting at the time. Whilst we are not opposed to redevelopment, the prospect of 3 large warehouses operating 24/7 15 metres away from the closest residence is unacceptable, as the site has always been office hours. An email from the developers in October 2020 stated the units were to be offices operating normal business hours, so we felt that we had no cause for concern. The developer is the agent of change here, and as he is seeking speculative planning with no guarantees of who will rent these buildings, nor that he will seek to safeguard our well-being, as he will be renting them out without any guarantees of a reasonable compromise to the operating hours. Noise is recognised by WHO as the second most harmful stressor in Europe behind air pollution. The operation of HGVs and other vehicles coming and going at all times of day and night and associated warehouse operations will have a severely negative impact on us in the form of disrupted sleep, stress, as stated in the Assessment of Noise Impact report from the Environmental Health Leader. At present, Lichpit is a very quiet area, which is the appeal for all of us to live there. Having our windows open at night and quiet evenings sat in the gardens will become a thing of the past. The local parish council have also strongly objected because of the increased noise, which will have a severe impact on us.
Another issue is air pollution. 3 large warehouses operating continuously with diesel-fuelled HGVs manoeuvring in and out will cause high levels of pollution, which could have a severe impact on anyone suffering with respiratory illnesses and may well cause new symptoms and conditions in others. Light pollution as well. As the warehouse is to be multi-storey and in use day and night, the light pollution will be significant. Lights will shine onto areas which today are either dark or softly lit, and this will cause annoyance both to locals and the array of wildlife living nearby in the protected Danes Hill Nature Reserve, which is just metres away. There's also the issue of the high-pressure gas mains. The Intech site, unlike the others in the area, was originally built taking into consideration the high-pressure gas main and the sewers running under Hassocks Wood, which is now Intech. Recently, SGN have strongly objected to this build, and they are very concerned and have said that comprehensive surveying of the land needs to be carried out with controls.
You have 1 minute remaining.
So in summary, the proposed multi-storey warehouse will present an intrusive and dominant presence, which is not in keeping with the original offices that were at this site, and will overshadow the local housing, which is only metres away. This is why so many local residents and the parish council have objected. As already stated, whilst we realise that the site does need redeveloping, a 24/7 operation could ruin the lives of the local residents and is totally unnecessary given the previous operating hours of 8 till 6 on the site and of those of the surrounding industrial areas. If this application is granted and the warehouses are built, please consider the council tax-paying residents and limit the development to office hours only, as it always has been. We all deserve the right to some peace and quiet. After all, would you like this large warehouse built right next door to your house, which it will be for me?
Thank you. If you turn your microphones off, please, but stay put for a few minutes. Questions to the speakers? Councillor Hussey. Put your microphone on, please.
Made reference to that they were only 15 metres from the development site, but our report on page 28 says the site is located approximately 40 metres. Is it 40 metres or 15 metres?
Sorry, could you put the microphone on, please? Because for the webcast, we need microphones on
Yes,
when you're
sure.
speaking.
From where I live, from my fence to that green fence you can see is 15 metres. Well, my property, yeah. Yes, my house. No, no. So it's probably 18 metres.
Any more questions for the speakers? No? Thank you very much. If you could turn the microphone off before you go. Thank you. And if we could have Mr. Mainwaring and Mr. Kings, please. If you go back to your original seats, thank you. Good evening to you both. You have 4 minutes between you. I'll warn you when you have 1 minute remaining, and it's the right-hand button.
Thank you, Chair and members of the committee. My name is Matthew Mannering, and I'm representing the applicant this evening. The proposals before you are the culmination of many months of collaborative working with the Council, responding to the comments made during various consultations and amending the scheme accordingly. The scheme has been designed around the retention of all important trees in and around the site, as well as ensuring that the amenity of both residential and office user neighbours is safeguarded. When originally submitted, the scheme was accompanied by a noise assessment demonstrating its compliance with WHO standards. Notwithstanding this, and following further consultation responses, the application was amended so that the loading doors of Unit C, which were circa 40 metres from the closest residential properties, have been moved to the other side of the building and are now some 60 metres away. Further noise analysis was also undertaken and submitted to the Council. Following discussions with the Council's environmental health officers and to their satisfaction, the recommendation before you this evening contains conditions from the environmental health officer which seeks to limit weekend night activity despite the scheme complying with WHO standards without such restrictions. The neighbouring employment buildings standing either side of the application site are not subject to any explicit prohibition on nighttime weekend activity, and condition 13 in the recommendation is a measure of the strength of approach adopted by the Council's environmental health team. As the officer's report concludes, the design of the development and the conditions contained in the recommendation clearly protect the amenity of those properties closest to the application site. Turning to some of the economic benefits of the scheme, industrial and logistics buildings facilitate the modern functioning of the country and should be considered as critical infrastructure similar to roads, railways, ports and airports. Despite this, there is a fundamental shortage of allocated industrial and logistics land in the UK. In the Council's most recent economic needs assessment in 2021, it reflects the national picture and documents the low level of supply of such buildings in Basingstoke. This means there is virtually no availability for firms in Basingstoke to expand into larger premises. The inability to meet the need for these types of buildings is restricting economic growth at a time when the economy is showing the weakest level of growth compared to similar EU countries. The I&L sector generates well-paid jobs, on average paying £5,000 per annum more than average UK salaries, and as reported by Oxford Economics and the Office for National Statistics, generates some 232 billion of gross added value to the UK economy. The lack of such allocated land is stifling the creation of jobs in this sector, in a sector which is predicted to increase its productivity by 29% in the years 2025 to 2050. Both the increased jobs and the increases in productivity are precisely the sort of economic development the country needs to help address the UK's productivity lag. In this case,
1 minute remaining.
In this case, the site is allocated for precisely this sort of employment-generating development and has been for many decades. It is important, therefore, that such land is put to the use which is intended. The scheme will be developed with strong environmental credentials, including achievement of BREEAM rating very good, the provision of 28 EV charging points, biodiverse landscaping scheme, photovoltaic panels, cycle parking, and the retention of all significant trees in and around the site. Our client is fully funded and ready to deliver these new employment opportunities in Basingstoke and the wider supply chain. We hope, therefore, that the committee will strongly support the planning application this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. If you could turn the microphone off, please. Questions for the speakers? Councillor Tomley.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, Mr. Mannering. You made a comment to do with the plans about, as I understand it, rotating the building or having turned the building to. So the clarity I'm after from you this evening is on the Unit C elevations. We do not have any titles to them on this drawing. So for the benefit of doubt, could you explain which elevation the middle one is?
So that's the western elevation, fronting away from the residential area to the east.
So those are lorry docks that you're referring to.
That's right, those are the loading
being
docks.
accessed from the front. So what you might call the front of the building is the lower eastern elevation, yeah?
Well, no, the bottom elevation there is the eastern elevation, but it's the rear of the building.
Oh, okay. Right. So what is the front of the building where human traffic goes?
Human traffic and vehicular traffic will go to the middle elevation
Right,
there,
okay. Right.
facing westwards
Okay.
into the Intech site.
And do you have a height comparison between what was knocked down and what the height is of these buildings? For the old Intech buildings that it's replacing?
Not immediately to hand, no, I'm afraid.
And then one last question, Chair. You made reference to solar PV, so I'm assuming this is on the roof you're looking at installing solar PV?
Yes, the precise details will need to be agreed with the council as part of the discharge of conditions.
Right. Thank you, Chair. Thank you.
Any other questions? I've got one myself. Look at the proposed site layout on page 48, which is Intake 4, which is the one that's shown in green. Round what I see as the back of the building, which is the area that abuts the housing estate, which is to the right-hand side of that. Can you tell me what activity will take place in that area?
Just the parking for staff.
And that's just staff parking, or is that going to be parking for, is that going to be sort of active at other times?
No, it'll be a fairly quiet part of the site. Originally, when the application was submitted, there were some loading doors proposed there, but those have been amended so that the loading doors now are all on the western elevation of the building, away from that residential area.
Lovely. Thank you. No more questions? No. Thank you very much. If we could have Councillor Cubitt, please. Good evening, Councillor Cubitt. You have 4 minutes. I'll warn you when you have 1 minute remaining.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much. Good evening, members. I basically want to say that...
Sorry, Councillor Cubitt, sorry to interrupt you. Councillor Frost, I think you need to be out of the room. Please continue.
Sorry. So I would like to say that I believe that this application continues to be in breach of NPPF paragraph 185 and in breach of DEFRA's MPSE and in breach of our EM12 of the local plan paragraph. And if I could... Oh, sorry, can I just quickly flip and go and get my MPPF? Sorry. Sorry, Mr. Chairman, sorry, members. Right, so just to remind members of 185, planning policies and decisions should also ensure that new development is appropriate for its location, taking into account the likely effects, including the cumulative effects of pollution on health, living conditions and the natural environment, as well as the potential sensitivity of the site or the wider area. And in particular, mitigate and reduce to a minimum potential adverse impacts resulting from the noise from new development, and identify and protect tranquil areas which have remained relatively undisturbed by noise and are prized for their recreational amenity value for this reason. So I believe that this application is in breach of that, and I also believe that it's in breach of EM12, which is our pollution policy, and specifically paragraph 101, which refers to noise and about the fact that it shouldn't impact on the residential and the air quality and the light pollution, which is being referred to as well. Lichpert is a very tranquil estate. It's a very beautiful estate. We have wonderful wildlife because it was a very cleverly designed estate with trees all around. And it's wholly unacceptable for our residents to be subjected to noise pollution due to this proposed change of use, which would, without doubt, result in a detrimental quality of life as a direct result of this change of use. It will lead to unacceptable risks to human health, to quality of life and well-being. Bear in mind that this proposal is planning to operate 24/7 during the week, and we live in the basin of the Loddon, and noise carries very far where we live in Lichpert and Old Basing. So it is without shadow of a doubt going to reflect and drift into Old Basing. The amended application as stands, whereby the applicant referred to the fact they're not going to be working ancestral hours on the weekend, does not remedy the likely effects from most of the working week. And noise from this proposed development will give rise to significant adverse impacts on health and the quality of life for my residents, both in Lichpert and beyond, as I said, because we know that the noise in this area travels across the River Valley towards Old Basing and Basing. So I request, members, that you reject this application for all the above-mentioned reasons. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cubitt. Please turn the microphone off, please. Are there any questions for Councillor Cubitt? No? Thank you very much. Councillor Harvey. Good evening to you, Councillor Harvey. You have 4 minutes. I'll warn you when you have 1 minute remaining.
Thank you, Chair. This evening, this application is before you both for the level of objection that's been raised by residents, some 46 letters of objection, and also because as the ward councillor I called it to the committee. Now, in listening to those residents, the principal issue is the change of use from office to warehouse. No one opposes the business on this site. No one is opposing the principle of having a business operating from here. No one's actually opposing the principle of having the warehouses from here. The issue is the operation conditions under which they will impact on the local residents, and that's what I'm asking you this evening to consider. Now, I met with the applicant. I asked for a meeting, and I was actually offered a meeting, and thank you to the officers for brokering that. And that managing agent isn't actually going to be the end user. They don't have an end user at the moment because during that conversation they couldn't guarantee to me who was going to be using this warehouse. It's speculative. Therefore, the desire to keep it 24/7 was a completely commercial basis, was basically so they could flog it for as much as they can do to bring in whoever they want to bring in. It wasn't about the planning issues, it was more about the commercial sale of the property during that conversation. Now, that presented an issue, and I pushed back on that, and I asked the applicant, no, will you please consider not doing it 24/7? And they said no. So having had that rejection, having offered and asked them to take that on board, that's why we're sat in front of you this evening, asking for your help. Now, what I'm asking for here is for you to consider the residents' amenity, and yes, those residential properties are in close proximity to Intec 4 in particular, the actual green warehouse. And I think the issue for those residents is the impact of HGV movements over the night period, what would be allowed. Now, all right, at weekends, we've got some conditions here, and those weekend conditions are going to be very helpful and will actually give those residents some relief. But it's not going to do it at 2 o'clock in the morning with HGVs turning up to that warehouse. And that's the principal issue. The noise impact, and you can wax lyrical and you can go out and pay whichever consultant you want to give you a technical report. But the truth of the matter is, in my opinion, in my humble opinion, at 2 o'clock in the morning in that green warehouse, those residents will be impacted by the HGV movements. Now, I'd like to thank the likes of Sainsbury's and Fives in their conversations with us as ward councillors on the other side of our ward, when they actually engage with residents, when they've got the HGVs turning up to their warehouses, and they actually had a very healthy conversation. So I'm quite disappointed that the applicant wasn't willing to do that and to bear that in mind. It was a quite reasonable thing to ask. What I think we're looking for and your help with is perhaps a condition that would assist in preventing the overnight use. That could be 9 p.m. to 7 a.m. It could be something reasonable. But the point being, it will give those residents a level of protection of their amenity during those early morning hours, that overnight period over the weekdays. And I think that's the principal problem, colleagues. So I accept what the applicant has said in terms of this is needed. Of course,
have 1 minute
we
remaining.
get that bit. About the consultation, there was a consultation. The residents were promised it would be office use. There was written confirmation. The consultation said, do not worry, it will be office use. They were then never told it was going to become warehouse. They were never consulted on it becoming a warehouse. So the letters that arrived from the consultants that were employed by the applicant said one thing, what the residents were then faced with was something different. And that led to obviously us trying to engage with the applicant to get them to consider the issues. We had the issues with the car showrooms on the other side of the ward, and we had to resort to environmental health. And it took us years to win those battles to get the overnight issues resolved in those cases. You have the power this evening as the committee to impose a condition that will help the residents and will save us years of fighting this applicant, because it will result in issues that we'll have to deal with, unfortunately, if it's allowed to go forward 24/7 over the weekdays. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions for Councillor Harvey? No? Thank you very much, Councillor Harvey. And questions to officers? Councillor Tomlin.
Thank you, Chair. Page 25 of the report, it's the second main paragraph, there's a small part paragraph at the top, about the Highways Authority raising concerns, and then the reply being that the Local Planning Authority has subsequently confirmed that there will be a restriction on Class E elements to Class EG2 and Class EG3. And then it says, any industrial process being a use which can be carried out in any residential area without detriment of that area by reason of noise, vibration, smell, fumes, smoke, soot, ash, dust or grit will be controlled via condition 20. So if we move to condition 20, which is on page 41, it doesn't say anything like that. It puts the classes in. It doesn't actually explain it. I'd want to know, with a condition that we've suggested in the text, the condition 20 that we have there, is that sufficient to actually protect the amenity of the residents? In addition, we could discuss the hours of work, but where is the measurement? Where is the quantification of how we can prove that it has been achieved, or where is there any regulation to prove it's been achieved? it just seems we've got it and we've kind of fudged it in section 20.
Yeah, condition 20 is just restricting the use. Obviously, I haven't repeated what you know the wording is. I've just referred to those various class references, and then obviously we feel with condition 13, the noise condition as recommended by the environmental health team, that is the condition relating to weekend restrictions, and for the reasons set out within the report by the environmental health officer, that with that condition, the proposal will be acceptable in terms of residential amenity.
So just a supplementary to that, we haven't really got any reference to the noise report other than there was one. Is there can we have any précis in the time available that tells us the expected noise levels, why our health and safety team are satisfied, or what mitigation is in place to make such a noise limit acceptable?
Yeah, obviously we're not going to be able to give you those technical noise levels. Obviously the applicant did have his had an opportunity to ask the technical noise questions of the applicant. So all I can just reiterate is obviously our technical expert, our environmental health environmental health officer has reviewed all of the technical information that's been submitted, and his experience has come and to advised us that in his view that the proposal is acceptable, subject to the condition that I've just referred to.
Thank you, Chair. And just to add to that, so Councillor Tomlin, the environmental health officer who we've spoken to a number of times during the course of this, writing this report, has looked at this quite extensively over quite a prolonged period of time. The noise report that's submitted is, say, we're not going to be able to go into the absolute levels of detail here, but I think the critical part was that the environmental health officer was clear that the information in the noise report in terms of the assessment and the methodology didn't necessarily agree with everything in there, but was satisfied that what it demonstrated was that there was a material difference between background noise levels at weekends compared to background noise levels at night during the weekdays, which is why the condition has been recommended, I suppose, both from the environmental health officer and imposed on the recommendation here in the form that it has. So it did actually differentiate that and actually take that into account in formulating that condition, if that assists.
Thank you, Mike. Councillor Hussey. Councillor Bowes.
Thank you, Chair. I suppose the obvious question is, can we restrict the hours during the weekdays as well? Can we impose that at this point?
Yeah, you could if you were minded to do so, you could do that. Obviously, our advice is that the condition as currently worded, given the advice we've had from the environmental health officer, is acceptable. You would have to be confident that it met the tests of the conditions in terms of being reasonable. You'd also have to consider whether you were wanting that to relate to the whole site or just one particular unit. I think the comments and concerns have been raised have only been made in particular to the unit C, which is the one nearest there.
Councillor Court.
Thank you, Chair. In terms of the existing site, the Intech site, what restrictions were placed on operation on that site as compared to what's being proposed?
The application that was made in 2015 for the change of use that's on page 21 of the report, there are no restrictions in terms of working hours.
Can I just get that?
That relates to Intech 2.
Any more questions for officers? Councillor McCormick.
Yeah, I'm picking up on the SGN objection. There doesn't seem to be a lot of information on why they're objecting. Do we know the exact reason why they are objecting to this application?
Yeah, as said on page 33, yeah, they raised an initial objection, and we had some additional information from the applicant that was provided to SGN, and we contacted them on numerous occasions. So they haven't formally withdrawn that initial holding objection, but they have had the additional information. They have had the suggested wording condition that we are proposing under condition 30. And we advised that that was going to be the recommendation that we were making. So whilst they haven't formally withdrawn that initial objection, they have made reference to the fact that this appears to be a like-for-like replacement, and they haven't come back and said that anything further since we've put to them that our recommendations for approval with that condition in relation to the requirements to carry out in accordance with SGN's working practices.
So just so that I get this just right, and that they've objected, you said you're going to go ahead with it anyway, and they haven't come back, and then we should approve on that basis?
No, Councillor McCormack, I think the position is that they provide an initial holding objection. We sought additional engagement with them, with the additional information that had come in from the applicant. We had no response initially. We did have subsequently I think I set out in the report a response from one element of SGN setting out that it would comply with their requirements, but it didn't actually formally withdraw their previous objection. It is for that reason the additional condition has been imposed. So the condition for the applicant to comply with the SGN working requirements is set out on page, in the list of conditions under condition 30, effectively. The other aspect of this is, as set out in the update paper, Health and Safety Executive have also been consulted upon the issue in terms of proximity to the gas pipeline, and have confirmed now that they do not advise against, so effectively raise no objection to this issue.
Councillor Gaskell.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Tomlin raised a question about the height of the old building compared with the new building. Do you have any details on that?
Clearly, those buildings aren't there anymore, but I believe that the existing Intec 2 is approximately 11 metres high, and Unit C, which is the one closest to residential properties, will be approximately 12 metres high.
No more questions for officers? In that case, debate. Councillor Rattigan.
Thank you, Chair. I've listened to the debate and looked at the papers and checked myself. I understand that when Computer 2000 was in Intec, they had 600 employees, all using diesel and petrol cars, as electric cars at that time were not available. So the site has been a busy site for a number of years. And if we turn to page 21, we can see that in 1981, they did have an outline planning permission for warehousing. Now, having listened to the applicant and the objectors, I think there is a realisation that the orientation of these buildings has been changed, and that surely is a positive in that regard. We obviously don't want warehousing, or certainly the loading of vehicles, as close as the applicant said to her home. That would be appalling. But the reality is this is a very important, and the words it says in this location is it North Daneshill East Strategic Employment Area. This town has lost many jobs to places like Reading, to Green Park, and we need to be aware that we need to modernise our offering to the business sector to make sure that we have something that appeals to them. Now, we all know when you're trying to sell, as Councillor Harvey says, they're trying to improve what they're going to sell, that you do improvements. You do change what it is to offer it out to the market, because that is the nature of what many people do. They do improvements on their house and then sell it on. So we are there. The noise report on balance, has an assessment that it's acceptable. I think that is fair. We need to make sure, as we will, the movement to electric cars, which we all accept are much quieter than diesel or petrol cars, is coming. And we all know that warehousing will be different because they'll be using electric cars or electric vehicles or transport in the future. Air pollution will fall on that basis, and therefore one of the objections disappears. I think this is, it's never going to be easy, but I genuinely believe everybody has tried to get it right, and therefore I am happy with the recommendation as it stands.
Thank you. Councillor Tomlin.
Thank you, Chair. I'll come on to something, but just picking up on a couple of points there. Electric cars, electric lorries, if we're lucky. 10 years' time, 2035, it's all in the news now that Europe's going to change the rules or be slower. You've got 10 years of potential noise and heavy vehicle goods on the people we're talking about impacting upon. So I hear what you say. I also hear that, well, knowing this site from old, because I used to live backing onto it, strangely enough, it used to be what we want for Basingstoke, which is like the R&D type facility. I know the way of the world's changed, but we seem very quick to embrace to turn it into warehousing and what I would call dumbing down the technology side. But my point at the moment is on page 39, we have a condition about construction and use, construction phase. And we have words like, it says, all works and ancillary operations which are audible at the site boundary. And we condition it to words that if you can hear it on the edge of the site, we're going to do things. You mustn't move plant and equipment around in certain hours. So we're kind of going to make it okay while they build it. And then when they run it, we kind of look like we're going to drop the bat and allow a little bit of a freer thing apart from weekends. Now, having lived in that area, you can hear the railway line in the distance, but in the evening, at night, there's maybe a train an hour, but it's quite a way away. But a heavy goods vehicle close to, I think, is a tricky one. And I suppose at the end of the day, my feeling with this is conditioning it in a better way would satisfy me. So I'll let the debate carry on, but that's my point at the moment, is I think we ought to, on the one hand, take into account jobs, but on the other hand, take into account what we're going to do to the local residents, and maybe we can help out on this one, rather than, as it says later on, rely on the applicant having a management plan about how they deal with complaints. I mean, the complaints are going to come to the borough, that's for sure, but I don't see how that would happen. So I'll just sit back for a moment.
Thank you. Councillor Bowes.
Thank you, Chair. I'm inclined to agree with Councillor Tomlin on this. I mean, we do need things like this for economic growth and employment in the borough, but the 24-hour use of it, even if the vehicles are quiet, even if we get to electric lorries, which I think is going to be quite some time in the future, reversing alarms. I mean, lorries tend to be fitted with them to stop them running over people. They're automatic. Those things are designed to be heard. So I'm not quite sure how that's going to work in the middle of the night. But if it was restricted to more daytime use, then it's not going to wake people up in the middle of the night, leaving them tired for work the next day. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Court.
I think some other quite vital information we haven't got. We don't know how many lorry movements we're talking about. None. We have no information. Of course, the applicant, from what I understand, hasn't got a user for the warehouse yet, as we're advised. So I don't think we have actually got enough information to get any proper understanding of what the impact of noise is going to be on residents. And I do find it very interesting that we should be, in terms of restrictions, we are restricting Friday nights to Saturday mornings, Saturday nights through to Sunday mornings, and Sunday nights through to Monday mornings, and nothing else. Most people are going to work, and I'm not at all sure I'd be very happy next to a perhaps quite a busy warehouse, and it may be a distribution warehouse, there may be, I don't know, 20 vehicles in an evening going on. So I think that might interrupt anybody's sleep, but I remain to be persuaded. Thank you.
Councillor Hussey.
During the night time, there's a lot less background noise. And the report says this when it's referring to noise from within the complex. Because there's less background noise, any noise outside the building, the occasional lorry reversing, that noise seems much greater in magnitude. It's not quite, it seems louder because there's nothing there to mask it. So to have noise midweek with children got school the next day, I think it's worse in the week than it is at weekends. There needs to be a limit of noise during the week, not just the weekends.
Councillor Rattigan, yeah.
As I said, I was in support of it. I wonder, because we've now allowed our refuge lorries to start at 6 o'clock in the morning, if Councillors Tomlin and Bowes are correct, maybe we should put a condition from 6 till 10 as a starting point. I don't know how others would feel about that, but that would certainly give 8 hours of rest and peace through the week. But I'm only sharing that to give you some thoughts.
Thank you. I am concerned about this, and it seems slightly bizarre to me that we are protecting people from noise during the construction period, which is a very limited period, but we're then going to expose them to the same sort of noise, lorry movements, on a permanent basis. And that strikes me as being a bit of an oddity. And I think there is insufficient reason to refuse this application outright because of the recent changes in planning law, the units that were there would benefit now from a Class E, and this application is for a Class E, so there is in fact no real change of use. But I think I would like to see a restriction at least on Unit C, and various times have been suggested. I mean, the evening one is 23 to 07, which would seem reasonable, or even 22 to 06. Those are my thoughts. Councillor Hussey.
I fully understand what you're saying there, Chairman, but I don't know many children that go to sleep at 11 o'clock at night with school the next day. 11 o'clock is the middle of the night for some young children. A much earlier time than 11 o'clock I would support.
Councillor Hussey, were you moving it then, or?
If somebody puts a motion on the table for rejection, I would probably support that. But if they want to put an amendment in to limit the hours, then in limiting the hours, I'd want to see an earlier time, close to what they're suggesting for the construction work. I'd prefer to see times staying, I don't know, maybe up to 8 o'clock, from 8 o'clock at night, no movements until 7 o'clock the following morning.
Are you proposing that?
But if nobody else will, I certainly will.
So, Chair, just to, I think, to advise the committee and really draw out this issue about the difference between the construction phase and the operational phase. The main reason for that being a difference is simply that during the construction phase, you have no awareness, I suppose, of how that construction will take place. You've got no buildings there to screen noise the same that you would have during the operational phases. You have no overall management of the site in that way. That's the reason why there's a difference in terms of hours and the way that it works. It's also because during construction you could have people right up to the boundary. So the whole point here is that the buildings themselves have been moved around, changed so that you've got the noisiest activities, if you like, the ones that the committee seem most concerned about, on the other side of the building, away from the residential properties. I think if the members were minded to only be accepting this proposal on the basis of an amended approach, i.e. to, if I've understood the debate so far, a restriction to Unit C only, so that is effectively isn't allowed to operate during the night time during the weekdays, then that would simply be an amendment to condition 13 as proposed, and that would enable, that could be quite easily extended to effectively require that those hours, as stated already, apply to units A and B, and for unit C we would increase that so that those same hours carry on through the week as well. I think the point around the until 11 o'clock, that has to be borne in mind of the fact that this site already has operational unrestricted operational hours. For Intec 2, it already has the ability to operate in that way, which is, if you look at the site plan, if we could just bring up the site plan a second. Sorry, the next one along with the, that's it, thanks Aggie. So Intec 2 is the grey building, the grey L-shaped building. So if you imagine the activity that's taking place on the green building, Unit C, which is the one that committee seem to be concerned about, the activity can already take place in Intec 2 just opposite. So that's why I think this would be the maximum that the committee could realistically impose in terms of hours and restrictions.
I haven't said I'm concerned about any particular block. I'm concerned about the movements in between the blocks with lorries reversing. And if you notice, the view from the view towards Badger's Wood at the rear of the site, there are some trees there, but when you look at the shape of the trees, there's no foliage that's low down. There's nothing to help to reduce sound. And sound at night when there's no background noise, so I stick with my original proposal.
Councillor Hussey, can you reiterate your proposal, please, so we know exactly where we are with it?
Chair, can I suggest that how we do this is Councillor Hussey has made a proposal to add a condition restricting it from 8 p.m. to 7 a.m. I suggest that if that finds a seconder, you vote on that condition. If that is agreed by the committee, then it gets added to the substantive motion, and then you vote on the motion in the normal way. If Councillor Hussey's motion falls, then somebody else can move a different condition. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. And I do recognise all the points Councillor Hussey's making, and I understand that where you're coming from on the issue. I suppose the advice I'd need to give in terms of the reasonableness of conditions is that you can't simply impose conditions that you feel otherwise, you know, others may wish to have, I suppose, in that sense. You have to impose them based on the evidence base in terms of the information that's before us. So we've already got, which has to be weighed as a material consideration, the Environmental Health Officer's view on this. The Environmental Health Officer is actually proposing nothing more at all than what's in the condition 13. I think to extend that to, you know, weekdays for Unit C only is one thing. To go across the entire site and restrict it even further than your own technical officers are proposing is a significant step change, and I think would put us at risk both in terms of a certainly a relief condition application, almost certainly an appeal, because bearing in mind, applicants can appeal just the single condition itself. So we would be in a situation where we would have an appeal on a major application in relation to just that sole reason, on that sole condition, where that condition is going significantly beyond the advice of the technical officers of the council.
Do I understand that you are seeing a technical report on sound and noise that we haven't seen?
Like with all applications, Councillor, there's a significant amount of information on the file which officers have considered.
Please, officer, look at all the objections about noise. We should have
sorry,
had
I was
full
just
pack.
if I could just finish that point, Councillor. As with all applications, there's the entire application. There's all supporting documents, design access statement, environmental health, noise assessment, etc. We can't possibly put the entire file before the committee. What I'm simply making the point is that if you were to go to a point where that condition was significantly beyond what's already been proposed, I have to advise that the council would be at significant risks of an appeal and I think it would be extremely challenging to put forward evidence to support that.
Councillor Hussey, as I understand it, you have put in a motion to restrict use, so no vehicle movements between 8 p.m. and 7 a.m. Is that on Unit C? Okay, no lorries between 8 p.m. and 7 a.m. Is that on Unit C only? The entire, so that's to the entire site, to the entire application site. Okay, and that's for weekdays. Is there a seconder for that motion? Councillor Tomlin.
Yeah. I would just want to make a revision, if I put that to you, that I agree with your times, but I wonder whether we've got at the moment on page 39 the condition, no machinery or plant shall be operated, no process be carried out, no deliveries should be taken. We're saying we don't want any external movement or specifically deliveries or heavy goods vehicle movements between those hours. Now, I would suggest that we could allow machinery and plant to be operated, because if it was breaking noise outside of the factory, then there is a major problem, of which we've not been advised there would be, but then we don't know who the applicant is, so there is a problem. But we would surely cover that with our health and safety. Our concern is the external noise. If an internal process is that loud, it'll be shut down it'll be shut down anyway by internally, because it wouldn't make HSE. But so it's a question of, now it's a blanket, but it's like a 24/7 operation, but no vehicular movements. Yeah, for the external noise. Right. So I would, if Councillor Hussey is okay with that, I would second that as the change in condition for the 3 units. Because we can't do the whole site.
Okay,
because
we've got been moved and seconded. It's for no vehicle movements for the entire application site between 8 p.m. and 7 a.m. and that's 7 days a week, 365 days of the year. Is that correct? Okay. Been moved and seconded for that amendment to be added to the file. Those in favour of that amendment being added to the file? I'll make that fine. 1, 2. It's 1, 2. Yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And those against that?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
You've got casting vote.
In which case?
Sorry, Councillor Freeman as well.
Yeah. Okay, 6. So that has been refused. Is there another proposal? Councillor Bowes.
Affecting Unit C, if we can restrict the vehicular movement with... I think Councillor Rattigan said that the lorries already, the waste lorries are starting at 6 a.m. Is that correct? Yeah.
They start now from 6 a.m. And I was wondering if the restricted period on C would be from 6 p.m. Sorry, that we will the allowance would be from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. And then after that there would be a silent period for 8 hours. So we're giving 16 hours of allowance and 8 hours of peace.
Starting at 6 a.m. in the morning, but
Councillor Bowes, if I can refer you to page 39 and condition 13. So that is effectively what's already obviously in the recommendation. I don't think there's a way in which you can realistically only deal with the issue of movement of vehicles. I think you would, because in terms of the enforceability of that element only, you know, a single vehicle turns up to the site otherwise. You know, I think that's going to be extremely challenging from an enforceability point of view. My advice would be, if you are looking to restrict Unit C only, the way in which you do that is to effectively seek an amendment to Condition 13, which effectively means that those same hours and those restrictions apply to Unit C through the weekday as well as the weekend. That would mean Units A and B are only impacted on the weekends, but Unit C is also restricted during the weekdays for those times. That would be my advice to the committee.
Yeah, okay.
I'm happy to second it.
Okay, so as I understand it, it will be for that Units A and B will be as per the original paper. Unit C, no machinery or plant shall be operated, no pressures shall be carried out, deliveries taken, received or dispatched from units identified as Unit C between 11 p.m. and 7 a.m. 365 days of the year. Is that what you are proposing?
Correct.
And that's seconded by Councillor Rattigan. Yep, thank you. Right, been moved and seconded. As I've just said, those in favour? I'll make that 12. No, 10. 10. And those against? 1. You're abstaining. Thank you. No, yes. That is. Sorry. Now we have got to. That's put that amendment into the paper. So now we need to vote on the substantive motion with the new amendment. I'll propose it. Could I have a seconder, please? Councillor McCormick. Those in favour of the substantial motion with the amendment we've just agreed. And I'll make that 10 again. And 1 abstention again? Thank you. That is approved. Good for that. Thank you, Lisa.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So the recommendation is for approval, subject to completion of the agreement as detailed in the paper, with the conditions and the amendment to Condition 13 as agreed by the committee.
Thank you. Item 2, land northeast of Dell Farm, Newfound, Basingstoke. Philip.
Thank you, Chair.
Sorry, Philip, before you do, if we could have Councillor Harvey back and Councillor Frost back, otherwise they won't be able to vote.
Thank you, Chairman. Item number 2, which can be found on page 50 of tonight's agenda, is a full application for the change of use of part of the land for the formation of a car park area with fence enclosure and construction of hard standing and laying of pipework to provide water to the site in connection with the proposed allotment use at land northeast of Dell Farm, Newland. It should be noted by members that the application is for the car parking area and associated pipework only. The implementation of the allotments is not considered to constitute development, as there is no material change of use between agriculture and allotment uses, and this is set out on page 60 of tonight's agenda. If I could draw members' attention to the update paper, which summarises the undertaking of a site viewing, and also provides a statement from Oakley and Dean Parish Council, who are unable to attend the committee this evening. The application is recommended for approval, subject to the conditions listed at the end of the officer's report. Thank you.
Could I have first speaker then, and that's Mr. Gittens. Good evening, Mr Jettens. You have 4 minutes, and I will warn you when you have 1 minute remaining.
Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to speak at this meeting. My name is Roy Gittins. I'm a resident of Leamington Court, speaking on behalf of the court residents, all of whom made objections to the proposed development. For many years, the residents of Oakley have been served by allotments on the existing allotment site on the parcel of land surrounded by Andover Road, Station Road and the railway line to Andover. The allotments are part of the successful community hub with village hall, children's play areas, tennis courts, all sharing car parks on either side of Station Road. However, the landowners wish to develop the current allotment site, although it falls outside of the local development plan, hence this application. The planning officers produced an in-depth report which lists the objections made and the reasons for approval. We contest some of those reasons. Firstly, the proposed development would preserve the landscape character and scenic quality of the area. Having viewed many allotment sites, including the one in Oakley, how can the usual collection of polytunnels, storage, compost heaps, etc., possibly preserve the character and scenic quality of the area? Allotments typically resemble a shanty town. An allotment site here will scar the landscape, not preserve it. Secondly, the second reason given is that the proposed development would not result in undue detrimental impact on neighbouring properties. The residents of the 17 homes which now form Leamington Court range from young couples, families with young children to the retired. All will suffer from new noise and air pollution, not only caused by allotment activities, but also from the doubling, perhaps even trebling, of vehicle movements. Clearly, there will be an increased danger due to these traffic movements. There will be loss of privacy and security, particularly for numbers 6 to 12 Leamington Court, both in terms of their amenity areas and, in fact, inside their houses. When residents wish to take advantage of the gardens during evenings and weekends, they will potentially be overlooked by members of the public. It's interesting to note that during the redevelopment of the site, many planning conditions were imposed due to the sensitivity the site was given. Conditions attempted to alleviate disturbance to the then 7 nearby properties by imposing time limits for both deliveries and building work. Residents of the now 22 nearest properties will suffer disturbance from dawn till dusk 365 days of the year, should the application be successful. The fourth reason given is that development would not cause an adverse impact on highway safety. A significant increase in traffic both within and exiting onto Andover Road will make the residents and allotment keepers less safe. There are no footpaths nor lighting within Leamington Court due to planning conditions to protect the back population and the normal level of traffic.
You have 1 minute remaining.
Thank you. Entry-exit onto the Andover Road can be difficult due to the high proportion of vehicles exceeding the 30-mile-an-hour limit, approximately 50% of traffic exceeding the limit in the 2020 Oakley Traffic Information Survey, the highest recording speed being 92 miles an hour. Worthy of mention at this point is the issue of access from the Andover Road to the allotment side. This is described in the report as a private matter. There is no public access nor public right-of-way. It is a private road. In summary, approval will mean disruption for allotment keepers, loss of privacy for Leamington Court residents, increases in noise and air pollution, increases in health and safety risks in general, increased risk of road traffic incidents, and of course damage to the scenic quality and landscape of the area. Residents object to this planning permission due to the negative impact it will have on their lives and the local environment, particularly at this time of a climate emergency. Thank you.
Thank you. If you could stay where you are, but turn the microphone off for a minute, please. Thank you. Before we go to questions, I'd just like to reiterate what Philip said, is that the allotments themselves do not need planning permission. The only reason we have this application before us is for the car park element of it. So the allotments can be built with no planning permission. Anyway, questions to the speaker? No? Thank you very much. And if we could have Mr. Williams, please. Good evening, Mr Williams. You have 4 minutes. I'll warn you when you have 1 minute remaining.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, councillors. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'm Matt Williams of Brimble Lee, speaking on behalf of the applicants to the Mulshanger estate. Firstly, I'd like to commend the report by Ms Steele. It provides a very thorough and impartial analysis of this proposal in the context of relevant policies. A significant number of issues and concerns have been raised about the proposal from within the community, and all of these have been fully addressed in Ms Steele's report, so it saves me having to cover them all in these 4 minutes. Now, you would have seen in the report, heard this evening, that this application is just seeking planning permission for the car park itself, not the allotments, because that does not involve a material change of use. We hope you agree that a car park will actually benefit allotment users, and that the use of the land for allotments without any parking, or perhaps with temporary makeshift parking that could perhaps be done without planning permission, would actually have a significantly greater impact on local residents and the highway network. Now, there is no defined standards or parking standards for allotments, but we, through the Mulshanger estate, explained why 32 spaces would be an appropriate provision for 50 allotments, based on the Mulshanger estate's knowledge of the allotments on their land next to the village hall. And this level of parking has been accepted by Ms Steele and the highway officer, together with movements, although of course the movements associated by the allotments are not actually a consideration with this application. There's a lot of concern about the impact on residents. Allotment users are not renowned for their antisocial behaviour. Allotments will be subject to the same tenancy rules as those published by the parish council for the existing allotments themselves. The car park will be suitably landscaped to blend in with its rural context, and Condition 4 secures full details of the landscape scheme. Just in relation to the car park itself, again on neighbours, in the update paper there is concern about users of the car park on residents, although I'd just like to point out, and on the plan, that car park is, well, it scales off about 60 metres from the edge of the car park to the boundaries of residential properties. So we suggest at that distance, and with a 20-metre buffer, that actually users of the car park itself will have no impact whatsoever on local residents. So in conclusion, we hope that you will approve this application in accordance with the recommendation, which will provide an excellent community or facility for the community that will benefit the health and well-being of parishioners. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Questions for the Speaker? Councillor Gaskell.
Thank you, Chair. There was a query mentioned about the use of the lane, and that it was a private lane, and then on page 53 it details that it's going to be handed over to the residents and it's going to be their responsibility for maintenance. Could you clarify that and tell the councillors your position on it?
Certainly, yes. We provided Ms Steele with a copy of the title, which provides the vendor, Mr Coleman of the Mulshanger estate, with full use for any purpose, basically to use it how he can pass that on to any successor in title for any purpose. What I will say, so from our point of view, that access and the estate road can be used for allotments, and the Mulshanger estate took legal advice on this, and we would not be pursuing this proposal if actually allotment users had no right of access. Ultimately, it's a matter of civil law in terms of rights of access, but our position is that allotment users, with the vendor's permission, Mr Coleman, will have full rights to use that access.
And could you clarify the cost of maintenance as well, please?
I'm afraid I can't, no. As I said, the users of the allotments, the legal view is that they have the right over it. I do not believe that they that neither they nor the vendor, Mr. Coleman, is responsible for the upkeep of the estate, but I'm afraid that isn't actually, I would suggest, respectfully relevant to this application.
Councillor Faulkner.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. This application obviously hinges on the fact there will be allotments. So I wasn't quite clear. Perhaps you could explain what guarantee is there that there will be allotments there?
I can't sit here and promise you that allotments will be provided. This is a proposal to develop a car park. That car park will not be developed unless there are allotments. It is the Moleshanger Estate's proposal to provide allotments in the same way as any proposal you have before you for housing or whatever. That I cannot give you a promise other than that is the proposal before you.
Any more questions for the Speaker? No. Thank you very much. Questions to officers, and I've just quietly asked Mike the question, which I will ask again, is can we condition this so that the approval is tied to the provision of the allotments? Mike.
Thank you, Chair. So I think the short answer is you can. You could put a planning condition on effectively saying that the use of the car park should only commence at the point at which the allotments are first provided. Now, obviously, appreciate then there's how many allotments would be provided, but I think the only thing you could do is actually on first provision of the allotments being provided, but effectively the use of the car park can't come in until that point.
Any more questions? No? Councillor Gaskell.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just concerned about the access and the cost of maintenance for the access. I know we can't deal with that because of the part of this planning application, but how do we deal with that? Because it is a concern.
I'm afraid that's not a planning concern. It's not before this committee.
I see no more hands up for questions, in which case debate. I'm happy to start it off. I will move the officer recommendation subject to the condition that we've already discussed regarding provision of the allotments, that the car park shall not be used until the allotments are in place. Is there a seconder for that? Councillor Hussey, thank you. Yeah, just seconding. Do you want to speak on it, Councillor Hussey? Right, moved and seconded for approval with the condition. Those in favour? Yeah, and those against? And one abstention. Thank you. Philip.
Thank you, Chairman. So the application has been approved subject to the conditions listed at the end of the officer's report, and an additional condition with regards to the use of the car park and delivery of the allotments. Thank you.
Number 3, 11 Woods Lane, Cliddesden, Basingstoke. Bethan.
Thank you, Chairman. This is a full planning application for the erection of 3 properties. The dwellings will be sited in the rear garden, comprising of a detached property and a pair of semis. These will be accessed through creating a driveway southwards via the existing access for the existing property. There are a couple of updates to the conditions since the preparation of the agenda. So condition 22 relating to the biodiversity enhancement management plan has been removed. The contents of this condition will be covered in the section 106 agreement, along with the off-site contribution towards biodiversity. The recommendation is also reflected to include the biodiversity enhancement management plan within the legal agreement. Conditions 3, 4, 5, 6, 21 and 23, which is now 22, have been amended to allow for boundary treatments to be installed to separate the site from the existing dwelling prior to any other work stipulated in those conditions commencing. An amended site plan has been submitted, numbering these boundary treatments in red, which is shown on one of the slides. The application is recommended for approval, subject to the completion of a Section 106 agreement for the contribution towards biodiversity off-site contributions and the biodiversity management plan, along with the conditions listed on pages 95 to 100 of the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Bevan. If we could have our first speaker, that's Ms. Hockin. Good evening to you. You have 4 minutes. I'll warn you when you have 1 minute remaining.
Good evening, Chair and members of the Planning Committee. I am Sarah Hockin, a Senior Planner at Turley, acting on behalf of the applicant. We have been working positively with your planning officers throughout the consideration of the full application for 3 dwellings on the site, and the proposal has evolved in direct response to the consultee comments, resulting in the well-designed and sensitive scheme before you today. We welcome and wholeheartedly support your planning officer's recommendation to approve the planning application and do not intend to repeat the details within the thorough report provided. The site has been designed to make an efficient use of a large plot whilst ensuring privacy of the existing and future residents. The proposed buildings reflect the traditional character and form of the area, benefiting from generous front and rear gardens and detached garages. They therefore integrate well with the existing properties and the wider context. The landscaping across the site has been sensitively considered with the provision of an appropriate landscape buffer at the west of the site. The layout also retains the tree planting at the north, east and south boundaries, with additional planting to provide enhancement to these areas, and new planting to the front and rear of the new plots. Due to the position of the units and the proposed landscaping, the site will not be visible from key landscape views. With regards to highways, it's important to highlight that Hampshire County Council Highways, as the highway authority, confirmed no objection to the proposal because of its small size and the retention of the existing access. The proposal will not generate significant amounts of movements, with just 1 traffic movement in the AM period and 2 movements in the PM period. This will not have a material impact on the surrounding highway network, nor an adverse impact on the highway safety. As members will be aware, Basingstoke and Deane Borough Council are unable to demonstrate a 5-year supply of housing land, and this development will help the council meet this shortfall. In this instance, paragraph 11D of the MPPF states that planning permission should be granted unless any adverse impacts of doing so would significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits. As outlined by the case officer in report, through the assessment of the planning balance, we consider the benefits of the proposal to outweigh any perceived and limited harm. Benefits include the provision of much-needed housing, creation of high-quality residential environment with integrated ecological enhancements, the creation of employment opportunities during the construction period, and future residents would generate local expenditure. The proposal will also deliver a net gain of on-site hedgerow units, and biodiversity net gain will be achieved via a Section 106 agreement, which will secure off-site financial contributions. For all the reasons I have stated, we respectfully request the Planning Committee confirm the recommendation to approve this application. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions for the Speaker? Councillor Gaskell.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just ask, on the existing site plan, in the sort of northeast corner, there's what looks like a number of buildings. Could you explain what those are?
There's some existing greenhouse sheds buildings in the existing garden.
Councillor Rattigan.
I attended the site visit on Friday. The entrance seems a shade contrived, if I'm honest with you. And obviously the number of vehicle movements will increase, although you say not hugely, but considerably. Are you intending, I know the access is there, but are you intending to do something on that? Because it doesn't look as though it would allow traffic to move round to the houses in the back.
The access will remain as existing, and it has been assessed by the Highways Authority, so deemed acceptable as it is. But obviously the boundary treatments will go in first to segregate the existing plot from the future developments.
Any more questions? No? Thank you very much. Councillor Cubitt. Good evening once again, Councillor Cubitt. You have 4 minutes. I'll warn you when you have 1 minute remaining.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, and good evening, members again. What I would like to say is that the principal objection from the residents is the grave concerns that they have from the impact of additional cars on Wood Lane. I know that the members that did go on the viewing panel saw from their own eyes how narrow Woods Lane is. And the residents in the parish council are very concerned about the cumulative impact that the housing that's already been added to the neighbourhood on that road, 9 houses in the last 5 years, representing 27 more cars, is going to further exacerbate what is a single track lane with no passing places, as you all experienced yourself. There have been several accidents on that corner alone, including a car which demolished the front wall, and there is no sight line to the right when you exit number 11. The development will add another 9 plus the 4 at number 11, and the parish council and the residents really feel that this development represents an overdevelopment of the site, and that it will have an adverse effect on the character of the village of Clidston. And when I look at our plan, specifically look at CN9 transport, I do believe, members, that it is in breach of E on page 96, where it requires development to only be permitted when they don't have a severe impact on the operation, safety or accessibility to local highway networks. I hope Hampshire County Council did in fact go and visit the site, because we had a situation where the officer actually confused the site with the field next door. So I hope Hampshire County Council did see it. I also believe that it's in breach of EM10, whereby in para 2, section C, just to remind you, it says that developments must have due regard to density, scale, layout, appearance, and respect of the surrounding areas in relationship to the neighbouring buildings and landscape features. And you will note in the report that there are a couple of neighbouring houses that will be severely impacted by the building of these houses. So if you could have concern and regard for what will be a significant impact on a very small single lane that is already under significant pressures from the houses that are being built in this area, I'd be appreciative. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Questions for Councillor Cubitt? Councillor Hussey.
Do you have any information about the number of estimated vehicles that reside in Woods Lane and therefore generating traffic movements compared to the through traffic, which it obviously has?
Sorry, I mean, it's a very good question, Councillor Hussey, and the answer is I don't, but you're absolutely right. It's a rat run from Hatch Warren and from north of the M3. So it's not only the existing residential impacts from additional houses, but it's also the fact that it's a rat run. I don't know. All I do know from the parish is that the 9 houses that have been added to the lane thus far in the last 5 years has added 27 more cars. So I'm slightly bemused by the lady who was representing the applicant stating that there'd only be 1 car movement, and we're talking about 3 extra houses here. We all know what it's like in the countryside and how many cars there are per house in the countryside.
Any more questions? No? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Questions to officers? In that case, if there are no hands up, I will ask Mike to clarify the situation regarding this access.
Thank you, Chair. So effectively, it is an existing access to the existing property, so that is the starting point. You'll note from the papers that Hampshire County Council's Highway Authority have not objected to the application, so they've seen the access. Clearly, Woods Lane, as already been mentioned, is a through route, but they're aware of that context, and it's really needs to be considered in that context in terms of the additional of 3 properties. In terms of actually, yes, that will generate movements in themselves, but in any given peak hour, the likelihood of that being to an extent which is then severe, which is the test that you'd have to reach to refuse an application on those grounds, it falls well below that. The other aspect to bear in mind is, as we've reported previously, where we do not have an objection from the Highway Authority, there's no substantive grounds on which you could realistically refuse an application on highways matters.
Thank you, Mike. Any other questions? In which case, debate. If there's no debate, I will. Councillor Hussey, followed by Councillor Harvey.
I live very close to Wood Lane and have walked it many times, going to the village of Cliddesden, particularly during the pandemic. And it is a difficult route to walk, but it's a safe route to walk if you're familiar with it, because you take precautions. And the people who live there and drive there, I think also would take, or assume they take the same level of precautions. And when you look at the number of traffic, the trips generated perhaps by the houses fronting onto Woods Lane, compared to the total volume using it, I do believe that the increment of 3 more houses, possibly 9 cars, is minuscule. And it'd be very difficult to measure any significant impact. So I have no objection to the 3 additional properties.
Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Chair. In weighing up the application, the 2 points I'm drawn to were both the landscape officer's comments and the conservation officer's comments, which were pretty stark, actually pretty direct. And the interesting about the conservation officer's comment was a officer took a view of it being less than harm, and the second officer took it raising it to moderate harm in the context of the conservation area and the listed buildings. So there was a sense of concern over that, and the objection stood, and I understood that. And the other point worthy of noting was the landscape officer's objection. And again, that similar vein of the impact of this on the village and of the area, and the relationship to the natural countryside, the rural edge, and how it affects that, and the relationship there. And I think those 2 points are important points that we should consider as a committee in the judgment we come to on this application.
Anybody else like to contribute? Otherwise, okay. Having been on a site visit, in terms of landscape, it sits quite low in the countryside, and it is very, very well screened. I don't think anybody's really going to even notice it once it's in there. So for that reason, I will move the officer recommendation from the chair. Councillor Hussey. Thank you. Anybody else like to contribute before we go to the vote? Councillor McCormick.
It's a difficult one because those of us who know Woods Lane know the constrained single track nature of it and the visibility implications on that particular bend, but without any objection from the highways, Hampshire Highways, our hands are tied really. We can't really go for a refusal that would be likely to withstand appeal. So I think we'll have to reluctantly support this.
Been moved and seconded for approval. Those in favour? That's 12. And those against? And 1 abstention. Thank you. Can the officer confirm, please?
Thank you, Chair. So that's approved as per the subject to the legal agreement and conditions at the end of the report. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. It's time for a 5-minute break, I think. Thank you. God, that first one was hard work.
Don't say it now.
Right, thank you everybody. Item 4, Newnham Green Farm, Tilney Lane, Newnham. And Philip.
Thank you, Chair. So item number 4, which can be found on page 116 of tonight's agenda, is an application for the demolition of the existing single-storey rear extension and outbuilding, and erection of a single-storey rear extension at Newnham Green Farm, Tilney Lane, Newnham. If I could draw members' attention to the update paper, which highlights the notes from the committee viewing panel, as well as the subsequent officer comments. The application is recommended for refusal for the reasons outlined on tonight's agenda paper. Thank you.
Thank you, Philip. If we could have our first speaker, which is Frank Dowling. Good evening, Mr. Dowling. You have 4 minutes. I'll warn you when you have 1 minute remaining. It's the right-hand button. That's it.
Could I just clarify, are we just dealing with the listed building application?
Yeah, well, the first one is the planning application, and then we'll do the listed building one separate.
Right. Okay. Good evening. Sorry. Okay. Good evening, Chair, members and officers. Apologies, Mr. Bingham can't be here today, so this evening. He has a critical work issue, but he was at the Friday's viewing and he's asked me to say a few words on his behalf. And I think these words cover really both applications. So if you permit me, I'll say them for this, but won't repeat them for the next application.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. Newnham Green Farm is the dream property, and in the 8 years that they have moved, they have steadily been able to sympathetically restore the older parts of the property, as well as introduce a new energy-efficient heating system and hot water system. Some parts of the house were lacking any utilities whatsoever, and this is all fixed now. It's not a farm anymore and hasn't been for many years, but is now an attractive country house as well as their family home. Like most listed buildings, it's been altered and extended over the years to meet the changing needs of each generation. With the first floor extension 2 years ago, the bedroom facilities are now up to scratch, but it lacks a decent kitchen, and the utility is a dispiriting, fairly modern extension which detracts from its appearance. Bless you. The final stage of bringing the property up to current standards is modernising the kitchen and boot room. They often say that the kitchen is the heart of the home, and this is what we strive to create in the farmhouse. We are proposing to demolish the utility and build a single-storey extension at the rear of the house. Presently, our kitchen, as well as being very small for the property, has an extremely low ceiling, which in some parts my sons and I are prone to banging our heads. It can also seat only 4 people, which becomes a challenge when our extended family gets together and wants to grab a cup of tea in the kitchen. In summary, size-wise, this space is at odds with the proportions of the property, and this family home is in need of a new kitchen and boot room to meet the family needs while staying sympathetic to the era of the property. We have fully respected the recent guidance provided by this authority to reduce the overall dimensions of the extension, and our second design reduces the floor space by half, and furthermore, with a dramatically reduced height, reduces the overall cubic volume. We believe we have ended up with a sympathetic addition to the property, which helps make this the family home it seeks to become. I would just like to add...
You have 1 minute remaining.
Right. Well, just in terms of the listed building, this design has been specifically put together to round off and finish off the house. We focused not only on the house but on the farmyard. We have 3 sides of a farmyard, and the kitchen's intended to be the 4th side. There was a building on the 4th side which was demolished many years ago. I think it was a granary, and the kitchen would form the 4th side of that square. The siting and design of the proposed kitchen completes that. It has no impact on the historic fabric of the house. It has no impact on the plan form of the existing house. It's single story at the rear of the building, and it's wholly subservient to the original building. There's been no objection to it from the parish council or from any residents. I think I'll just leave it there for that application for Mesa.
Thank you very much. Could you turn the microphone off, please? Any questions for Mr Dowling? Councillor Godison.
Thank you, Chairman. Good evening, Mr Dowling. Can I just ask you, I was on the viewing panel. I did ask the applicant at that time whether he'd had a bat report done, and he told me that he'd had a bat report done for the original application. Are you able to tell us what that bat report said? Thank you.
That bat report did find evidence of bats in the house. There are a number of them circulating around. As I recall, it didn't make specific reference to the woodshed, the single-storey building that we want to demolish. And the update report, I think, just to clarify, it says on page 7, talking about the 2016 report, it says several bats were seen emerging from and returning to different parts of the building. I don't think when it says the building, they're talking about the woodshed, they're talking about the farmhouse. That was what that 2016 report was focused on.
Thank you. Any more questions for Mr Dowling? No? Thank you very much. If you return to your other seat, yep. Councillor Cubitt, once again, good evening. You have 4 minutes. I'll warn you when you have 1 minute remaining.
Thank you very much, Mr Chairman. Thank you very much, members. And thank you very much to those that came on the viewing panel. I would just like to emphasise that the applicant has reduced significantly the size of the extension from 90.4 square metres to 49.6 square metres. They have reduced the extension to meet all of the concerns raised, and I do believe that this application now is sympathetic to the listed building and the surrounded areas, and I do request that you consider approving this. Now, at the meeting on site, the bats issue was raised, and I hadn't appreciated at that time that the reasons for refusal were in part to do with bats, because all the correspondence that I'd read to date had been in relation to the character and form of the proposed extension in relation to the existing building. I spoke with the applicant subsequent to the site viewing, and they advised me that firstly they were under advice that single-storey dwellings, I don't know whether this is true or not because I don't profess to be a bat expert, are invariably not required to have bat surveys because they're normally required on higher buildings. I don't know whether that's correct or not. They assured me they have never seen a bat fly out of that small single-storey log shed. That said, nobody in the parish has any problems with this extension, and nor do the neighbours. So I would request humbly that you consider all that you have before you, except that the parish council has no concerns, and it's invariably the parish on listed buildings that it's the normally the agency that gets most excise when there are proposals, and I think it's been very sympathetically designed, and I would request that you approve this sympathetic extension. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cubitt. Any questions? No. Thank you very much. Questions to officers? Councillor Rattigan, followed by Councillor Gaskell.
It was noted on the site visit that there would be a tree removal. Is that the? Did we find out if that was the fig tree that was in front of the wall, essentially, onto the courtyard, the square courtyard of the farmyard?
Yes, we believe that to be the case, yes. It's the trees, as you can see it, just where just to the right of the arrow, where the barn is to be demolished. Just where the single-storey extension is currently, it's got the two roof lights, there's those tree in that area there.
Chair, if I may, that isn't the fig tree that we saw when we stepped out, but that's fine. Thank you for pointing out the tree that will be removed.
Councillor Hussey.
On page 121, third paragraph from the bottom, if you could just expand on that for me, please. It says, given the amount that the original dwelling has already been extended, can you quantify that? How much has it already been modified from the original building? In percentage terms, square footage terms, whatever? Sounds like this is one extension too many. That's the implication that I read from the statement. But I'm trying to find out how much it's already been extended.
Thank you, Councillor Hussey. So we don't have a comparative in percentage terms, I'm afraid. But if you have a look at the visualiser there, it is effectively the fact that there's already been works to the back of the property. If we just have yeah, just going back to the picture, please, Aggie. Just to the rear elevation. That one. So effectively, there's the original form of the farmhouse with the sort of cat slide roof that you can see coming down to the smaller windows on the side, and it's effectively already had that projection out of the rear already.
With the white door, is that additional?
That's additional to the original listed build. So if you look at the planning history of the site on page 120 in particular, you'll see that there's been quite a number of extensions over a period of time. I wouldn't be able to describe to you, in all honesty, every single part of how all those come together, but effectively the point you raise is correct. The report is saying that this is an extension too far beyond. So it has had a significant extension. In fact, if just on, could you just go to the floor plan? Thank you. So effectively, as you can see on the left-hand side, the extent of the extension beyond the already element that sticks out from where the original back wall would have been. So you can see the sort of original, I guess, plan form. Yeah, exactly. From that bit onwards is then the extension. So it is that plan form beyond the existing alterations to the property that is part of the reason for recommending refusal.
Councillor Gaskell.
Thank you, Chair. It's back to my declaration of interest. I just wanted to state that I'm on the parish council for this area. There is a statement on page 136 from the parish council which reads, Newnham Green Farm is a significant building within the Newnham Conservation Area. The parish council appreciates that these further proposals seek to complement the main house. It sounds like it's in favour of this application. On the night, it wasn't. It was more. It wasn't an objection, but it was more. We need others to make a decision on it. So I just wanted to clarify that. My second point was within the report. It states that the size is too small. Now the applicant's already reduced it in size. Have they come up with a suitable size that it should be? And it also mentions the materials aren't consistent with the area. Has that been conveyed to the applicant?
So thank you, Councillor Gaskell. So the recommendations for refusal based on the current proposal, so the reduced size scheme is still deemed unacceptable. So it did start as a bigger proposal, but just in terms of the plans before you, so it is a reduced size compared to what was originally submitted, but even that reduced size is still considered to be unacceptable in relation to the reasons set out, so particularly its design, size, scale, depth, appearance, and therefore the erosion of the character of the original farmhouse. That's the essence of the recommended reason for refusal.
But my question was, has a suggested size been given to the applicant?
No, so there's not a prescriptive size that would be there. It would be a combination of size, how it's designed, or those types of issues. So there wouldn't ever be you can do X square meters or anything like that.
And my second question was about the materials. Has that been conveyed to the applicant?
I don't know, in all honesty. I don't know whether that's been part of the discussion with the case officer, but the application is as set out before us.
Any more questions for officers? Councillor Tomlin, followed by Councillor Goderson.
Thank you, Chair. So reading there that the demolition of the barn, outhouse, whatever, that's, am I right, that has been regarded as significant harm to the listed building curtilage? That's quite a material matter, yes?
That's correct. So I think if I draw members' attention, I think there's a short element on that on page 123. And I think what the point that the officer's trying to set out is that those barns are part of that, how that original building would be read, and therefore its demolition to effectively allow for this to go forward would be an additional harm in addition to the actual extension itself.
Councillor Goderson.
Thank you, Chair. With reference to Councillor Hussey's query, am I not right in thinking that the original extension plus this new application is what represents is the same as the size of the original house? The new application is not the same size as the original house. If we look at that previous site plan we had with well, no, anyway, the one we had before, but no, it wasn't that one. What was where was, anyway, what I'm saying is the previous extension with this new application, between the two of them, between the two of them represent the same footprint as the original house. The new extension is not the same size as that. That was the point I was trying to make.
Councillor Rattigan, second question.
It's debate, isn't it? It's debate. Thank you, Chair. I just, to be picked up so quickly, I admire your enthusiasm to get through tonight. Like all of our finest houses, they do need upgrades. And sometimes, I don't know if we've got jewellery, but my wife certainly has, you sometimes have to reset a jewel. And the reality is, we do need a BAT survey. I don't think there's any doubt that one that's 6 years old is out of date, and I think is a requirement as outlined in the papers. But I think we should move to the first reason for refusal. It's design. Well, most of us would accept that the design is good. The size, well, it's been scaled back. We are aware of that. It gets rid of some of the ugly back building at the rear of the property, and we don't lose as we came in on the bus, some people couldn't leave in their cars, but we came in on our bus and could see that the view, the conservation look, and the historic farmyard will be well preserved. What's going to be done to this, if it gets passed, is a ridding of a flat roof, a ridding of a wood barn that needs to be removed, and it's not all being removed, only a partial removal. I genuinely believe that this comes down to the factors on the reasons for refusal, and I am actually happy that it doesn't impact the character of the main house, and that is probably accepted. And I take Councillor Gaskell's view that they are looking for a direction in the parish council, but I genuinely believe that this ticks a lot of boxes when we are looking to improve some of our finest homes across the borough. So I'm quite happy that we do put some conditions on it, like a bat survey, but the other reasons for refusal, I think, fall away, if I'm particularly honest, and could be conditioned. So I'm happy to reverse the officer's report, and I'm happy to move approval.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Goderson and Councillor Hussey to speak, but before we do, is there a seconder for Councillor Rattigan? Seconded by Councillor Frost. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, I was going to give you a long speech about why I would wish to propose approval, but as Councillor Rattigan's done that, I'll simply second his motion that we approve on the basis that I do not feel that in any way it erodes the character, form and appearance of the Grade 2 listed building, and the demolition of the very small barn cannot be considered to result in further harm to the significance of the listed building. So I'm happy to second Councillor Rattigan's proposal. Thank you.
Councillor Hussey.
Well, I've listened to the comments, and I'm looking at page 123 and the officers' comments, and nobody's addressed the observations made by the officers about the amount of glazing on the northwestern gable appearing excessive and exacerbating the harm resulting from the proposed extension, mixed roof forms, cluttered appearance, lack of cohesion. Nobody's addressed those comments. They've given an alternative saying that they think it's acceptable, and the officers here are saying because of these reasons it is not acceptable. So, as I've not heard anything to criticise what the officers have suggested, I would support the officers' proposal for refusal.
Thank you. Mike, you wanted to come in?
Thank you, Chair. It's just in relation to, obviously respecting the fact that there's a motion which has been seconded to be voted on. I suppose just a couple of points to note. So the fact that the scheme has been reduced during the lifetime of the application in itself isn't material to then how you decide the application. So you need to consider it on the basis of what's there before you now, whether it's acceptable or not. Obviously, for the reasons set out in the officer's report, which I won't repeat, the recommendation is based for refusal. The issue in relation to the small extension that it would remove, and I don't know again if we've got a photo of the rear. Yeah. So effectively, I think the way that's been assessed, and I draw members' attention to the fourth paragraph on page 123, is that it does acknowledge the fact that that would be removed. It's a flat roof modern addition. It doesn't contain any historic fabric, but effectively the removal in itself isn't deemed to provide any particular public benefit because it's already there. It's a relatively insignificant extension comparative to the main. So I'd just clarify those 2 points in particular. In relation to voting on the motion, to deal with the issue of the BAT survey, effectively it would be required prior to any permission being issued. So it couldn't be part of a planning condition. It'd have to be delegated to officers to receive it, consider it, and if there were no material issues resulting from it, then a permission to be issued if the motion was carried, and that would include any subsequent planning conditions that secured anything that the BAT survey required.
I've got Councillor Tomlin listed to speak, and then we'll go to the vote.
Thank you, Chair. Sort of clarification, but we talked about the, clearly there's a feeling that that little woodshed barn shouldn't be demolished because it affects the whole setting. Now, I'm looking at the plan, and I don't see the plan interfering with the barn, unless I'm much mistaken, because that dotted line on that one is a previous thing, so overlaid is the new, and so I'm not understanding why they want to knock the barn down, because it's not actually in the way of their development. Might sort of, it'll still be within view of the house. So my point is it possible that we could find a reason to accept this application, but condition that the barn doesn't come down? Is that a possibility?
Thank you, Councillor Tomlin. I think on the basis that it's part of the submitted plans, that's not something that we could then require through planning condition, I'm afraid.
We'll go to the vote in a minute. The only thing I would add to that is I looked in that barn. If it's not knocked down, it's going to fall down.
Yeah.
Very, very, very soon. It is, it's well past its sell-by date, and I think it would be very, very difficult to save it. Be moved and seconded for approval, subject to a BAT survey, and that the outcome from that, if the officers will be delegated to finally approve or refuse, subject to the BAT survey. Those in favour of approval? And those against? 2. Okay. And 3 abstentions. 1. Councillor Godison, could you turn your microphone off, please?
Oh, I'm sorry.
That is approved. Philip.
Thank you, Chair. So that application is approved, subject to delegation to officers to require the submission of a BAT survey, and that to be obviously considered acceptable, and any subsequent conditions attached. In relation to planning conditions, I would just recommend, similar to effectively the conditions on the previous approval, namely that it be subject to the standard condition in relation to plans, time period for implementation, that there's specification of materials, joinery and brick detailing.
Thank you, Mike. Right, item 5, same address, Newnham Green Farm, but listed building consent. Philip.
Thank you, Chair. So item number 5, which can be found on page 133 of tonight's agenda, is a listed building consent for the demolition of an existing single-storey rear extension and outbuilding and erection of a single-storey rear extension at Newnham Green Farm, Tilney Lane, Newnham. If I could draw members' attention to the update paper, which highlights the notes from the committee's viewing panel and the subsequent officer comments, and the application is recommended for refusal for the reasons outlined on tonight's agenda paper. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Dowling, you do have 4 minutes if you wish to take them, or you're welcome to rely on what you said before.
I was slightly confused because I thought we were dealing with the listed building one before rather than the household or planning application, which is why I didn't really talk about trees or bats or the requirement for, what was it? Sorry, excuse me. A biodiversity report. And all I wanted to say was that we're very happy in terms of the tree to have a condition put on requiring a tree protection statement be provided. In terms of the bats, we've heard that there would be a requirement for a bat survey, I suspect they won't find anything because it is single story. It's, as you say, it's well past its sell-by date. They've been storing machinery in there, so there's a smell of oil in there, which bats won't like. And bats tend to prefer high buildings. There's a very large barn there, which is ideal for them. The house has bats in it, I know. That's a 3-story, essentially, building. So very happy to accept that a condition requiring a bat survey to be provided. And also a statement on biodiversity metric, or whatever it's called, that we provide an amendment to the plan to provide bat tiles within the extension and bat boxes in the garden. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions for Mr. Dowling? No? Thank you very much. Could turn the microphone off, please. Thank you. Councillor Cubitt.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman. To take heed of your preamble at the beginning of the meeting and avoiding repetition, I'm just merely offering to answer questions if anybody has any. But I just wanted to highlight one thing. The applicant said at the viewing that the ivy on the front of this barn was holding the barn together, and they weren't able to prune the ivy because they knew were they to prune the ivy, the whole thing would collapse. So just to give you a bit of an indication of the current status of that bit of the building. Does anybody have any questions?
Questions for Councillor Cubitt? Councillor Goderson.
Thank you, Chair. Would it not be more accurate to describe it not as a barn, but as a very small single-storey shed?
I think you're absolutely right, Councillor Goderson.
Any more questions for Councillor Cubitt? No. Thank you very much. Questions to officers? No. Debate? Councillor Rattigan.
Chair, I'm happy to remove, to move the proposal that we accept this. Many of the things that we would be doing would be in line with the previous application, and I think, frankly, it is better that it's all done in one time. The work can be done, and we can ensure that a dual, because that's what these are, these Grade 2 listed buildings, can be preserved for the future.
Moved for approval. Do I have a second? Councillor Frost. Moved and seconded for approval. Those in favour? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10. And those against? 1. And abstentions? 1. Thank you. That is approved. Philip.
Thank you, Chair. So as per the previous household application, is for the delegation of the listed building consent subject to the receiving of a bat survey and subsequent conditions as required by that and consultation with our consultees. And in terms of conditions, as before, it would be similar to the previous scheme. Plans conditions, materials conditions, timing conditions, details of windows, etc., to be submitted, which will be proposed should the bat survey be found acceptable. Thank you.
Thank you. Item 6, land at Westridge, Highclere, Hampshire. Luke.
Thank you, Chairman. This is an application at land at Westridge, Highclere. This is a reserved matters application following outline planning permission, which was granted in September 2020. The proposal is for the erection of 4 dwellings, 1 5-bed and 3 3-bed dwellings, together with vehicle access and pedestrian access. With regards to updates, since the committee report was written, we received 2 additional public comments which raised a number of concerns which were summarised in the update paper in front of you. In addition, we received comments from our landscape officer, and as a result we've amended the landscape conditions to just secure further details to be provided. The application is recommended for permission as per the planning officer's report set out in the committee agenda. Thank you.
If we could have our first speaker, Mr. James Ward, please. Good evening, Mr. Ward. You have 4 minutes. I'll warn you when you have 1 minute remaining.
Good evening, Chair and committee members. I'd firstly like to bring everybody's attention to an extension that commenced on 8 Rutherford Close, the neighbouring property to this development. Now that took place in May 2022. The application was submitted in September. Now the plans here do not show the extension on that. Obviously the latest drawings of that were published online on the 16th of May 23. So that's been around for sort of 10 months at this point. And obviously looking at the plans as we do now, I don't feel it shows the true impact on that property. Plot 3 is just 16 metres away from 8 Rutherford Close, and we feel this breaches our privacy. The upper north-facing windows of plot 3 will have a clear sight into the west-facing bifolds on the extension of 8 Rutherford Close. And at just 16 metres away, I feel this is too close. On previous drawings, the plot 3 and 2 of the development were further south. They've been moved further north on the updated plans. Now this also causes another issue with lighting for the driveways and the turning circle. As the properties are right close to the border of Rutherford Close, where the property, as you can see, sits in between the dwelling of number 9 and its garages, it's causing a clear sort of block of sight from late afternoon onwards onto the driveways and the turning circle. We also feel that the 1.8 metre fence that's being erected on the boundary to Rutherford Close is going to shadow over all properties and taking up majority of the light from our garden from late sort of afternoon onwards, and again that's also going to affect the light into the house itself along with the dwelling of number 3. I think the only final points to particularly make on this is in relation to the landscape buffer, and it's just that there are conditions set out to prevent any future occupants from instantly removing any trees that are set out in the drawings and turning that straight into an extended garden. So we'd like to see some conditions put on today to prevent that from happening. I'd also ask
1 minute remaining.
I'd also ask the question of whose responsibility is it to maintain and upkeep that buffer? Is there a trust put in place to fund potentially for a certain period of time set up by the applicants, or is this going to be the responsibility of the new owners of the dwellings? Thank you.
Questions for the speaker? No? Thank you very much. And if we could have Mr. Zonri. Good evening to you. You have 4 minutes. I'll warn you when you have 1 minute remaining.
Good evening, Chair, members of the committee, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Giuseppe Zanri. I'm Planning Director for Donington New Homes. I'm here this evening to fully support your officer's recommendation for approval of this reserve matters application that we submitted in October of last year, and also builds upon the outline planning approval of September 2020. It's for 4 new homes which we have designed in conjunction with your case officer in a style that we feel complements and blends in with Highclere itself. We've spent a lot of time and energy with the case officer and also with local residents as well. We held a public exhibition in October of last year. 25 residents came along to view our plans, and a majority of them were in favour of what we were proposing, which you see before you this evening. On areas that we did address in terms of the obscuring of glazing on the first floor, we did that. There is distances of 16 plus metres to the nearest properties, which the gentleman mentioned at number 8 Rutherford Close. The first floor are non-habitable rooms. They are bedrooms as well, which needs to be borne in mind. We addressed other boundaries for number 9 Rutherford Close. We changed a post and wire fence to a 1.8 metre high closed board fence with hedging. And also with Little Flexford House, again, we retained the 3 metre high laurel hedge and obscured glass to the first floor bathroom window. All in all, there's been a variety of styles within Highclere. We believe we've got a good development here that is sympathetic to Highclere itself. There is differences between the Huff House and also traditional builds. So we've actually come up with a traditional build with materials to match accordingly. The scheme is fully compliant with your officer's recommendation and also council policy, as well as national planning policy framework as well. Fully compliant also with car parking, as well as bin stores, collection, the waste collection point as well as highway. There's only 4 houses, so there'd be minimum disruption on the roads itself. All in all, we commend this to yourselves, and hopefully we'll obtain planning permission from yourselves as councillors. We'd like to start building in the summer of this year. It'll take us about a year to build. We will try and build as sympathetic with local residents as well, so we
have 1 minute remaining.
That. Yeah. In terms of the landscaping belt, we can look at that. We can put in place a management company that can actually deal with that as well, but there is biodiversity net gains with that. But again, as I said, fully compliant with council policy. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Questions for the Speaker? Councillor Harvey, followed by Councillor... Yeah, go on, Faulkner. It happens. Councillor Harvey.
I'll ask the officers this as well, but just to clarify in terms of that commitment on the boundary treatment, on the upkeep, if it was a management company, would you be willing to put a trust in terms of a community sum to upkeep that, or would you be looking to the properties to upkeep that themselves with a management charge through the management company, or have you not got that far yet?
Yeah, sure. I need to check that with my managing director. It's something that obviously we've looked at management companies elsewhere. We can provide that detail back to the officer, but I'm sure we can come to some arrangement about that.
Councillor Faulkner.
Thank you, Jake. Yeah, just one question. In the outline planning approval, is the granary, which is a 100-year-old remarkable building. So how do you plan to be able to maintain that going forward?
Again, you're quite right, Councillor. As part of the outline planning approval, it falls within Plot 1, and the condition stated, Condition 22 stated that it remains in situ in perpetuity. Speaking to my managing director about that, we're happy to accept a condition to enable the restoration of that building. as part and parcel of a planning condition on the reserve matters. But yes, it remains in situ as part of plot number 1.
Thank you. Any more questions? No. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Questions to officers?
Can I ask, in terms of obviously the management company, that point that's been made, could we, I'm conscious of how you go with the condition and whether it has to be involved, but there has to be something, I think, that captures the point about the residents being responsible or a commuted sum. And I wouldn't want the residents to be responsible. I think it should be the developer that comes forward with a commuted sum as part of the 106 as part of this. And I don't know where we capture that or how we might achieve that. It's separate to the planning application. I get that because this is reserved matter and so on, but I don't want to lose it. And the second point that Councillor Faulkner quite rightly raised in terms of the existing building, if it is within plot 1, who has the ultimate legacy responsibility for that building?
So firstly, with the landscaper, I think at this stage, I haven't had discussions with the developer in terms of the maintenance or management. If that's something they are willing to discuss with us, I'll leave the mic to pick up on that. In terms of the granary building, once again, I think it was a case of on the outline we looked to retain it as such, as the development's not directly impacting that building. It wasn't considered necessary to go further and ask for its restoration. There wasn't a material planning reason to do that. The planning conditions, there wasn't a requirement, so that hasn't been put forward, and we haven't put it forward. It's, as councillors, I guess that's your decision as to whether you want to take that a step further. I don't know if you want to jump in, Mike, with the landscape in that element.
Thank you, Councillor. So I think the issue is that, and it's an issue I know that comes up a lot, but I think the maximum that can be done through the planning process, I suppose, is ensuring that an area is maintained to a particular standard. I don't think there's a mechanism by which you can require specification as to who specifically, and that's always the differential that we come across. So you can have you could have a planning condition, for example, setting out that there needs to be a specification for maintenance, so as to how that land is maintained, but that can't extend to necessarily setting out that it's one body or another, or residents or otherwise. So effectively, that'd be at the outline stage. We wouldn't be able to secure that now at the reserve matters in any case, I'm afraid.
Any more questions for officers? In that case, debate. Councillor Harvey.
I guess I'd ask, could we have an informative that, and I would take it, colleagues, I would like a strong steer that actually the applicant, as the developer, pitches up with a commuted sum, and that it doesn't land on the 4 properties on their shoulders. That would be a personal preference, knowing how management companies work and how developers can do. If the developer's willing to do that, that's great. And informative, I guess, is all we can do. That it would be a strong steer if colleagues agree with my view on that.
Yeah. Anybody else? In which case, no, I will move the officer recommendation from the chair with the informative that Councillor Harvey's suggested. Is there a seconder? Councillor Court. Moved and seconded for approval. Those in favour? Yeah, that's everybody. Thank you. Luke, to confirm, please.
Thank you, Chairman. So that's been moved for approval in line with the case officer's recommendation, alongside an informative to highlight and the management of the landscape strip going forward.
Thank you. Item 7 is withdrawn. So item 8, Silchester Farm, Little London Road, Silchester. Gemma.
Thank you, Chair. Item 8 seeks planning permission for the demolition of 3 agricultural buildings and the erection of 8 prefabricated pods for the use as an office, farm shop and overnight accommodation at Silchester Farm. The proposed development is to support the ongoing diversification of Silchester Farm, which is home to wedding and events venues. The proposed office is to be used by Silchester Farm staff, and the proposed farm shop would sell produce of Silchester Farm itself and from other local agricultural businesses. The remaining pods would provide overnight accommodation comprising a total of 9 rooms. The application site is located within a countryside location. By way of update, it's advised that the pre-commencement conditions included within the recommendation have now been agreed by the agent. The application is recommended for approval subject to the conditions listed on pages 210 to 212 of the main agenda.
Thank you, Gemma. And we've got a first speaker is Miss Kame, who I don't think is here. No, in that case, Mr. Handy, please. Good evening, Mr. Handy. You have 4 minutes. I'll warn you when you have 1 minute remaining.
Thank you. Chairman, members, good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today, which I do on behalf of the applicant, Silchester Farm. As you've heard from Gemma Cox, your officer is fully satisfied with the principle of the development and notes that the installation of the 8 pods will support the continued diversification of Silchester Farm and the ongoing success of this local business. The proposals result in the creation of 10 jobs upon completion of the pods, with a further 5 jobs potentially being created as a result of the business being able to diversify its offerings elsewhere, such as the provision of in-house food catering for events. Furthermore, the proposal will also provide business opportunities for local suppliers, ensuring the continued viability of the community and services of the local area. This shows both the social and economic benefits of the application. Your officer considers that the pods, which will, as you've heard, provide staff office space, farm shop and overnight accommodation, would not give rise to a harmful or significant impact on the amenities or character of the surrounding area. Visually, the pods will be sympathetic to the history of the site and will ensure that the site retains an agrarian character, with the council's heritage officer noting that the pods will deliver an improvement to the setting of the nearby listed buildings, helping to secure the future viability of this historic site. In terms of the neighbours' amenities, your officer concludes that the proposals will not result in significant impacts by virtue of noise and disturbance, and we concur with this assessment. Any sounds arising from the office pod or farm shop are highly unlikely to cause significant levels of disturbance. Whilst we acknowledge that concerns have been raised by objectors with regard to the overnight accommodation pods, it's apparent that the creation of these additional areas of on-site accommodation will result in fewer trips at the end of an event being held at the farm, displacing those traffic movements to the following day. On behalf of the applicant, I'd like to emphasise that Silchester Farm staff will also be on site at the end of each event to ensure guests continue to be respectful of the site's neighbours and do not create any unacceptable levels of noise or antisocial behaviour. This highly professional and managed approach, combined with the separation distances between the pods and the neighbouring properties, will ensure that no harmful impacts will arise. The council's environmental health team were consulted on 2 separate occasions during the consideration of the application and raised no objections or concerns on either occasion. This plan application does not seek to modify the approved hours of operation for the event spaces associated with the farm, and events will end as per the approved closing time within the site's premises licence. In summary, the proposals will not cause harm to the amenities of nearby dwellings, and a refusal of the application on this basis would, in our review, respectfully be not possible to be defended at appeal. Your officer notes that the application is considered to be acceptable in respect of all other technical matters, including highway safety, flooding, biodiversity and trees. Overall, this is a positive development that seeks to allow the already successful Silchester Farm business to diversify, introducing essential resilience to a hospitality business that is currently at risk of significant disruption and losses in the event of resurgence of COVID or any other significant unplanned occurrence. The proposed office space is desperately needed to support existing employees and to provide them with a purpose-built and separate working space. The farm shop will help the business diversify and provide an on-site building to sell Silchester Farm
we have 30
produce.
seconds left.
Thank you, along with other local produce grown by nearby farms and businesses. And finally, the overnight accommodation will support rural tourism and enhance the weddings and events aspect of the business. We're happy with the draft planning conditions that have been recommended by your officer, and on the basis of the above, it's considered the application is acceptable, and we hope that you will endorse your officer's recommendation and approve the application. Thank you.
Thank you. And if people don't mind, I'll start the questions myself. They're described as ecopods. What is the ecological benefit of these?
Good question, Chairman. I think essentially it's a couple of aspects. One, it's that they are relatively minimal in their construction. What I mean by that is they're prefabricated. They come essentially as flat packs on the back of a flatbed, which makes them relatively low level in terms of carbon intensity, in terms of their construction. They'll typically be have a sort of a frame, which is then the roof is a dome shape, so it's hard to describe them as walls or roof. It's all one. Which is likely to be a corrugated material, and then it'll have sort of timber-clad gables. So essentially, they're relatively light touch construction and low carbon intensity, which makes them eco in effect.
Okay, thank you. And it says they're powered by solar panels. As I understand it, these are going to be for overnight accommodation. What are they going to be powered by at midnight when people are coming back from a party and going into them?
I think, in fairness, the solar aspect is the other element of them being more eco-friendly, and they will contribute towards the power. But I wouldn't want to mislead you or the committee members in saying that will be the sole source of energy. I suspect they'll have an element of on-site power generating them, particularly at those times of day, like you say, where perhaps if it's not been the sunniest of day, there's not been a sort of stored element of power that they can use overnight, then it will essentially revert to the on-site existing utilities.
Thank you. Any other questions? No? Thank you very much. Questions to officers? Councillor Tomlin.
Thank you, Chair. Page 197, when it was at the bottom, right at the bottom of the page, a technical memorandum and response to representation in respect of noise and disturbance was subsequently submitted. Could you pray see that, share some of that with us, because it's sort of just a statement and it doesn't really tell us anything other than environmental health are now happy.
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, so additional information was submitted by the applicant in response to representations received, and also at the request of the Environmental Health Officer upon reviewing those objections. That information, the information that's included within that memorandum, is set out in the relevant section of the report, which just talks about the general commitment to have somebody, an employee on site, to make sure, or to ensure that any users of the overnight accommodation would not cause any noise or disturbance to neighbouring properties, and also the technical memorandum itself is produced by a recognised noise consultant, just confirming that based on the proposals and in their experience that the proposal as a whole would not give rise to any adverse impacts, and that is all set out on the relevant sections on noise.
Sorry, could you give me a steer where that's where that is, please?
Page 205, which talks about noise. Yeah, so the second paragraph on overnight accommodation, that paragraph there that states that staff would be on site at all time, that is information that was provided within the agent's response to the objections, and that was reviewed by the Environmental Health Officer.
Any more questions for officers? In that case, debate. Okay, thanks a lot. I am not comfortable with this. I don't see any, they're called ecopods, I don't see anything, any ecological benefit in them whatsoever. So I really do find it somewhat disingenuous. As far as I'm concerned, they're prefabs. Other than that, the site has got a history of complaints from neighbours about noise, particularly at the end of events that are there. And having people staying on site rather than coming out of the event, having had a few drinks, as we all do, me included, and being quite loud and exuberant, maybe for a quarter of an hour, half an hour as you leave, you've gone, it then goes quiet. You can have a number of people staying on site, possibly making some noise. Having said that, I really, really struggle to put that into a legitimate planning objection. So that's where I am with it. I'd like somebody else to contribute. Councillor Court.
Thank you, Chair. I think that particular issues you've raised crossed my mind as well. There's no indication whether they're going to be serving alcohol and what time they're operating to, whether there's going to be any restriction on their operating hours if they've got Christmas things, and also, you know, to prevent people staying not only one night but 2 nights. So that does concern me. I'm assuming this particular place would be applying for a license to operate as well, both for entertainment and also for serving alcohol.
They've already got the licence. I can answer that one quite clearly for you. Councillor Tomlin.
Well, I was going to make that quite light, that it does say in the report that it all fits in with their existing licence and the proposals are, yeah, no, so that sounds okay. I'm quite happy to propose this, but I would like a condition to be considered, and that is that prior to commencement, the applicant does a noise survey of the timing of the end of session, if you like, or end of an event, to see what the background noise is. And then 3 months after implementation of the plan, they do a repeat one to see that there's been no extra impact as of this. And then I think that I would be quite happy to propose it.
Thank you, Councillor Tomlin. I think the difficulty of that type of condition is well, sorry, I don't think you can condition it in that way, I'm afraid. The reason for that is that if you were to do that, and let's say at the end of that, the outcome is deemed to be unacceptable, the permission's already been granted, what would the condition then do effectively to rectify that position? So I don't think that's something that could reasonably be captured in a condition. I think I recognise the points being raised about dwell time and people leaving events and being there. I think the point that the report has tried to set out, I suppose, and particularly the additional information that was submitted in response to the objections raised, I guess was trying to take it to as far as it can, insofar as at least having on-site management, so there being that position secured, and then in addition, it's a technical note which has some reference to the author's experience of other such sites, which, with this type of use, I think it's very difficult to put any technical aspect to it in terms of levels of noise in the same way that you would do, for example, with machinery or anything like that. This is about, I guess, human behaviour as opposed to anything else. I suppose the other aspect of it is if you've got people staying on site overnight, I appreciate the dwell time, but equally you haven't then got the noise of people leaving in other forms, whether that be transport, taxis, whatever it might be. So I think there's a balance there, but unfortunately there wouldn't be a way of securing the condition that you suggested.
Councillor Tomlin.
That's an interesting dilemma, because we're basically looking to approve something where we don't actually know its effect, and we've got something about well, the only mitigation, to be honest, is a manager on site. It's a question of measuring the effectiveness of the manager on site, which is what they're offering. So how can we must have a way of saying that if it's not effective, then, to be honest, the mitigation, it might sound daft, but 2 managers or something. So if that's the only thing they're offering is a management, how do we challenge it, or do we have to go through environmental health and go through the route of complaints again?
Thank you, Councillor. So I suppose the short answer is yes. That is the approach. I think, as I say, I think with these types of proposals, I guess ultimately it's a planning judgment. It's based on, it's a relatively small number of units. It's supplementing something that's already there. This isn't starting afresh. This isn't taking something which doesn't have an activity and a use associated with it, that's controlled by the licensing arrangements in terms of the existing uses. And this is an extension or supplement to that, as opposed to proposing anything that in itself is a noise generating use. I think the way that the planning conditions have been put forward is ultimately the maximum that the planning can achieve in terms of providing some controls over that in terms of that process.
We've got Councillor Hussey followed by Councillor Faulkner.
My point's been already covered.
Sorry, I missed that. Been answered. Thank you. Councillor Faulkner.
Thank you, Chair. Yep. I mean, the source of any noise is already there, and having attended these sorts of events, they all differ significantly. So it's impossible to, say that one week to the next will be the same, different, or whatever. I mean, in my generation, we called these Nissan huts. Now they're eco pods, and I think it was mentioned that. If some people slump off into bed early rather than stumble about the site, as you say, looking for their car or a taxi, I think the net result will be no different. So I'm happy to support the application as is.
Councillor Faulkner, is that are you putting the motion in?
Yeah, I'm happy to propose we accept the officer's recommendation.
Councillor Freeman.
I'm not happy with this. We know that the site already has issues with noise that it isn't particularly managing well, and I'm uncomfortable with allowing them an excuse to make more noise. Like you say, these people, who's to say that wedding guests aren't going to start up an extra party around the pods, just drag some chairs outside and carry on after the main event's ended? I don't like it, but I don't see any reason we can refuse it, which is not fun. I do not like being in this position. I don't think this is a good idea, and I think it's going to probably blight the lives of residents who have already made complaints, because we know this company don't manage their noise very well. But again, there are no valid planning reasons, so we're going to have to approve it, and I think that is wrong, but there's not a lot I can do about that.
Thank you. It's been proposed for approval. Is there a seconder? Councillor Hussey, thank you. Anybody else like to speak before we go to the vote? No. Moved and seconded for approval. Those in favour? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And those against? 2. And abstentions? No. That is approved. Gemma.
Thank you. Just to confirm, that application is approved, subject to the conditions as set out in the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you to the officers, particularly on item number 1, which was very difficult. And see you all very soon. Thank you. Good night.